welcome to this special interactive edition of the Global Conversation. I'm joined by the European Commission President, José Manuel Barroso. He's just delivered his State of the Union address, and we'll be talking about that, but also the issues that matter to you most. We've had loads of questions coming in on our social media platforms. Mark Davis, who's our online editor, has been tracking those. Mark, what can you tell us?
Well, I'm monitoring the reaction on the social networks. I'll be taking some of the comments and the questions posted by people online, and I'll be putting them directly to President Barroso. Now, when this interview ends on air in about 20 minutes, it continues online in a Google Plus Hangout, a kind of video web chat. And joining President Barroso in that will be our panellists, who you may be able to see down here. They've got things they're very keen to ask him, but anyone can ask a question. Just use the hashtag #AskBarroso, and I'll try and ask it.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, President. Now, we want to go straight to Syria. Do you echo the scepticism and caution that's been sounded by the US regarding the Russian plan on chemical weapons?
We believe we should try it. But of course, there are good reasons to be skeptical because, as you know, until recently, the Syrian regime was denying to be in possession of chemical weapons. And now they are saying that they are ready to accept international control and, let's say, neutralization of these weapons. So we should be skeptical, but I believe we should try to have that solution because the European Union has always stated that for the overall conflict, only a political process can give a lasting solution.
So if this didn't work, would you then support military action?
I'm not going to make now hypothetical answers to hypothetical situations. The position of the European Union is well known. We believe that we should have a strong reaction of the international community to what was an horrendous crime and the violation of international law and the crime against humanity, indeed. That reaction should be taken using, of course, the United Nations as source of international legitimacy. That's why we are now pursuing in the United Nations these efforts. And, of course, apart from that, it's very important also the humanitarian aspect. And that is direct responsibility of the European Commission. I want to tell you that the European Union is by far the biggest provider of aid to the Syrian people and to including refugees in the neighboring countries.
Well, we received a tweet from Lise in Denmark, and she said, last year you said the European Union has a responsibility for a new and democratic Syria. And she asks, what will the EU do? And what will you do if Bashar al-Assad were to stay in power? Would you work with Syria still for that new democracy?
Look, the Syria situation is very complex, and I believe it's now a civil war. It became a civil war. It started with the aggression of the Assad regime to its own people. But now it's difficult, of course, to have a complete, clear picture of the situation there.
But would you be prepared to work with him again?
We are prepared to work with the Syrian people and to facilitate a minimum of consensus in that country. I've been, for instance, with refugees. I've been in a Zaatari camp in the north of Jordan. I saw hundreds of young girls. I was in the young girls part that are studying now under tents. They are living there. It's a tragedy, a humanitarian tragedy of the incredible proportion. Some of them were coming from villages that were destroyed by the Assad regime. They were having a complete normal life. And now, as the executive director of UNICEF told me, without European Union support, they could not be there studying. So it's a humanitarian tragedy of the biggest proportions. We need to act. And that's why we have to explore the political, let's say, the political path as well.
OK, President, we're going to have to move on to other issues now, European issues. And one of the major challenges we're facing, of course, is unemployment. We received a question from James in the United Kingdom on that.
Efforts to reduce the unemployment rate has failed so far. What efforts are you going to make over the next 12 months to actually see the reduction in unemployment rates both in Greece, Spain and other countries? Thank you.
To be fair, there has been a slight decrease in unemployment rates, but not enough to change the overall figure, which stands at 12.1%. What's going wrong?
What's going wrong is the economic situation of some of our member states, because it's in fact a situation that, as I said yesterday, it's socially unacceptable, politically untenable, and economically also unsustainable. We are doing everything we can at European level, but let's not forget this employment is mainly a national competence. The employment policies are a national competence. But precisely because of the crisis, we are mobilizing all tools and indeed asking member states to give us more instruments to fight unemployment. That's why we proposed a youth guarantee. We have now put 6, in fact, there will be 8 billion euros for the youth employment initiative that we are going to front load. It means that we are going to implement it in the first years of the next budget period. And we are working also in terms of skills, in terms of making sure that the skills corresponds to demand in the market. I've launched this global alliance for digital jobs. We are working with transnational companies. But frankly, and let's be honest and realistic about it, it depends also on the reforms the governments are doing or not doing in the countries, so that they create a more, let's say, favorable environment to the creation of new jobs, namely for young people.
OK, but if we're going to be realistic about it, some of your critics are saying you're being completely unrealistic with this 8 billion euros, that is not going to make a difference, that it's a drop in the ocean if we're looking at the major problem of youth unemployment, which is 5.5 million young people. 8 billion euros is just not enough.
First of all, there are more resources in the social fund that we can mobilize. It depends now on the member states willing to do it. And secondly, this was the money that the governments accepted to put at disposal of the European Union. I have fought for more. The European Commission wanted more. Let's be clear about this. The European Parliament as well. But
so you would say the 8 billion isn't enough? We do need more.
I think let's start with them. Let's start to use this, because one thing it's sometimes strikes me that instead of doing the things, people start to speculate about other opportunities. The reality is that so far, not €1 has been spent, because this is money for the period that starts in 1st of January 2014. And what I'm urging the governments of Europe to do is to adopt as soon as possible the regulations, so that we can have the programs up and running on the ground from the 1st of January 2014. Meanwhile, what we have done, I created teams for 8 countries, the countries that have the highest youth unemployment, and we have mobilized money from the structural funds that are for other purposes for this quick action, and this is going on, and that is already producing some results. But the challenge is indeed immense, I have to say.
So you're frustrated with national government's slow response. I'll have to actually stop you there, because I'm hearing Mark has something for us that he's receiving on social media.
Yeah, there's been a lot of tweets, activity on Google Plus and Facebook about the economy, and in particular about young people and unemployment. We've got a tweet here from Maximo Miccinilli, and he asks, the economic crisis has been severe. Which messages do you have for young Europeans to still believe in the EU as a project?
I have a message of confidence. In fact, I believe the latest figures we have, not only we in the European Union, but also OECD, are showing that we are starting a recovery. We are not yet out of the crisis. How could we be out of the crisis with these very high figures of unemployment? But, in fact, the figures of the second quarter of this year, and also the soft data that we are receiving in terms of consumer confidence, investor confidence, in terms of the stock markets, buying equities in Europe, and also the so-called advanced indicators show that there are good news coming. It's still a fragile recovery. Also in employment, we have seen either a stabilization of the unemployment or even a decrease in some countries.
It's a very uneven
picture. But that's why we are pushing the governments to make the necessary reforms, because some of them, in fact, have been successful in this fight against unemployment. A concrete example. Vocational training is very important. At the same time that we have many young people unemployed, we have many firms that are asking for people with ICT competencies. There is a demand for people to work in the health sector. So there is a mismatch. We have also created a portal in the European Union called EURES that puts precisely the information available of jobs that are available in the European market.
You mentioned the growth, but the growth rate is, as you said, small, is 0.3%. And many economists are saying that is not sufficient to reach escape velocity out of this crisis, that we're going to see anemic growth and therefore minimal impact on unemployment.
0.3 for the quarter. So if we analyze it, it's quite...
But they're saying the future projections are also anemic.
For instance, my country, Portugal, had a growth of 1.1 the second quarter, after many
Greece's economy contracted.
Quarters in the red. No, Greece, I think they are on the right track in terms of they are expecting a primary surplus. So I believe we have to recognize the huge sacrifices made by the Greek people, and I believe with determination Greece will come to positive figures. But we have to remind ourselves why we are in this situation. Why? It came with the financial crisis that, by the way, did not start in Europe, but also it was the result of overspending by the national governments, including the case of Greece, but also irresponsible behavior in the financial sector. And now we are correcting things. This takes time. Let's be honest about it. Let's not promise what we cannot deliver. But in fact, a lot has been done. First of all, to avoid the dismantling of the euro, to avoid situations that would have been much, much more difficult and painful for our citizens.
Okay, but the International Monetary Fund admitted it made mistakes in Greece. What mistakes would you admit to?
I think we have been basically supporting Greece. And
would you admit to the fact that mistakes were made there?
Basically, no. Our position has been always that we need to pursue fiscal consolidation, but we have always highlighted from the beginning that this was not the only policy. There were structural reforms that were necessary. For instance, privatization was necessary. So it's a caricature to present the European Union policy in the euro area as just fiscal consolidation. We have, of course, countries with this huge debt have to make an effort to put their public finances in order, but we have advocating investment and growth-friendly fiscal consolidation and more structural reforms. Greece has done a lot with great sacrifices of its people in terms of the fiscal side, but the structural reforms took some time to start. Now, I believe they are doing with more determination what is necessary for their recovery. And other countries, Portugal, Ireland, that is already been able to go to the markets with success, Spain, that has a program just for the banking sector, what they are doing in terms of reforms, for instance, in terms of correcting their external balances, is really amazing.
I'm going to have to cut you there, President, and we're going to move on to another question. And this is a question received from a celebrity. It's the director of the award-winning film The Artist, which won 5 Academy Awards.
J'avais une question à vous poser qui était de savoir, sachant, parce que vous savez aussi bien que moi, que le système français de financement du cinéma est très bon, pourquoi...
I had one question for you, because you know as well as I do that the French system of cinema financing is good. It allows us to have a healthy economy, so if it's so good, why is your current policy destroying it? Why not export it to other European countries? That would be a way of creating jobs, new friendships, communities.
So here he's obviously speaking about the EU-US trade deal, the cultural exception. But beyond that, in some respects, what underlies this, for me, is this growing sense of mistrust, top-down, across all levels of society, including intellectuals and influential people like this director. At the EU, people don't trust the EU anymore.
Shall I answer in French or in English?
In English.
Because we are speaking about cultural diversity,
yeah.
I will be happy to respond directly in French because the question was in French. First of all, my congratulations to the director, because I've seen the movie and it is indeed a great success. By the way, that movie received support from the European Union, the European Commission. We have the media program, and we have the biggest program of support to cultural diversity that exists in Europe.
He doesn't think so.
I'm sorry, but no, because he was referring to other issues that I think there was a misinformation or a misunderstanding, probably not completely innocent. We are for...
Sorry, not completely innocent. Would you say that you were misinterpreted or that...
I think that I was misinterpreted and also...
We're talking here about the reactionary statement.
Exactly. And my statements were from some quarters, they were explicitly changed. I have never said that it's reactionary, the French system. On the contrary, I support the cultural diversity. What I said is that some arguments against globalization are reactionary because they don't take in consideration the evolution of the world and the opportunities that also globalization offers us. So, but one point I want to make clear, nobody defends more cultural diversity than the European Commission.
What about the sense of mistrust?
We have never proposed to eliminate cultural diversity from the negotiation with the United States.
Let's move on to the next issue of mistrust, though. What about mistrust? We've seen a Eurobarometer poll which has shown we're out of the 6 biggest European nations that trust in the EU is at an all-time low. I have to ask you to be brief on this.
I've seen the Eurobarometer for all the 28 countries, not only 6.
Yeah, but the 6 big countries.
And the reality is that there is more mistrust in the national governments than in European institutions.
Yeah, but I'm asking you about the European institutions.
But I want to make the point that, of course, in times of severe economic hardship, the citizens, the common citizens, are frustrated. They look at their leaders, not only at European leaders, at national parties, at financial sector leaders, and they are angry, and rightly so. But that does not mean that the European Union only is to blame. That means that there is a real crisis, an unprecedented crisis, that creates problems that we are trying to address, and I'm making the case explaining what we are doing, what we can do, also what we cannot do, and I think this is the serious answer. Of course, I'm aware of the dissatisfaction with the citizens regarding the European Union, but if you look in the same...
You said take a certain amount of responsibility for that.
Of course, all of us have a responsibility, and I'm ready to assume that responsibility.
Mark is coming back to us, I think.
Yeah, well, another one of the themes that seems to be coming back again and again, and it has been over the last few weeks, is Euroscepticism. Now, again on Twitter, Sophia has asked, how will the EU cope with all these Eurosceptic parties in the member states? Are they a serious threat for the EU as we know it?
I think it depends on the other parties and on those who are in favour of Europe. And precisely, I'm asking those who are in favour of Europe to come out, to stand up and defend what Europe means, what Europe can do to help citizens solve their problems. But I believe, being more concrete, that in next European elections, the political forces, the moderate political forces from the centre-left to the centre-right that are basically pro-European will keep a strong majority.
You don't think there'll be big Eurosceptic gains as has been predicted?
They may be gaining some ground, yes, but I believe the huge majority of the Europeans will remain very much in the pro-European side.
We're very short of time, but I did get a question on Twitter, which I was going to ask you anyway, and that was from Victor in Ukraine. And he's asking, would you like to stand again for a 3rd term as Commission President? Now, obviously, would you, if you were given the chance?
Look,
yes or no?
I have not thought about myself in this matter.
Would you
I have 1 year more of mandate, more than 1 year. 1 year is an eternity. I think 2 mandates of 5 years is already a lot. And I think everybody, even the critics, recognize that there's been extremely tough times for all of us. But I don't want now to speak about myself. I think the time now is to roll up our sleeves and not to throw in the towel. So I'm focused on what we have to do for Europe and not on my personal, let's say, future after next year.
We've got seconds left now. I just want a very quick answer here. If Europeans are to look back at a concrete achievement you have left them with, in your time in office as Commission President, what would it be?
Many. From the climate policy to protect our planet, that is the most ambitious policy in the world, that I'm very happy because some people are still denying that there is climate change, to concrete issues like, for instance, reducing the roaming charges for people that travel, and namely, during the crisis, to avoid countries like Greece or Ireland or Portugal to become insolvent, because in that case to have to go out of the euro, because in that case we will be in a real much more dramatic situation.
Okay, well, we're going to have to close this chapter of the global conversation. Now, we've got our next chapter, which is about to open on euronews.com. Mark Davis is there with his panel of Europeans who are raring to go to challenge you. So please join us in that next chapter of the global conversation.